As she said, my name is Karen Peak, and I actually met these two ladies at Cokesbury at a book signing, and I shared a little bit of my story with them, and here I am. But I'm going to share with you my testimony, and my testimony it's pretty heavy, so I hope that you guys are excited to hear about me. But I'm going to start with birth. I came out in a different way than most people. I was born with bilateral hip dysplasia. Has anyone ever heard of that? Well, it's interesting. Bilateral hip dysplasia is when you have no hip sockets and your hips are just dangling like this when you come out of the womb. And with that, the doctors didn't know what to do, except they told my mom she's going to need surgery because she's never going to learn to walk. She's going to be in a wheelchair all her life. She's going to have operation after operation after operation. We're going to have to form some hip sockets inside of her. And that's how I came out of the womb. Came out with the mysterious, okay, it's going to be funny, my life. So my parents took me to church with them, and they went to some strong prayer warriors at their church. And they said, my daughter needs some prayer. And they told them about my situation, and they prayed over me. Then we had to go back to the doctor, and we got some x-rays. The x-rays were going to determine if I'm going to have surgery, when the surgery is going to be, kind of what the scenario is, just so they know what's going on. We got the first x-rays, still no hip sockets. So they told them a time frame, and they said, we're going to do the operation at this time. And so after they were told the news, they went back to the church, and they told the people at the church she's going to have an operation for her hip sockets to be formed at this date. And can you pray for her? They prayed over me, and they prayed over me. And right before I went back for the operation, the doctors took one more x-ray just to make sure that everything was what it was supposed to be. God miraculously healed me. I had 2 hip sockets that just formed. And I have never had one operation. I have never been in a wheelchair. I have walked, I've played soccer. I was healed miraculously at birth. And that right there showed me God is an amazing God. Growing up, I was a healthy horse. I was kind of upset about that. I wanted to be sick and not go to school because I hated school, to be honest with you. I didn't like having to get up early and go learn because learning was not easy for me. You don't like school either?
No, we're talking adult school.
Oh, I'm sorry. I loved school. School was my favorite thing. Oh, I'm sorry. School was great. I'll Okay. Well, I did like school. It was harder for me to learn. I don't have a disorder or anything, but I had to earn my C's and my D's and my A's and my B's. I couldn't just go through school without studying, so it was really hard for me. So going to school, I was like, oh, I got to study, and that's why I wanted to play sick. But my mom always knew that I was playing, so she forced me to go anyways. But it was okay. I liked being healthy. But I grew up military family. We moved around a lot. And with that, I was desperate for friends growing up, because when you are in one situation where you have friends and then all of a sudden you're picked up and you're moved somewhere else, you kind of get desperate for friends. You're lonely, you want to fit in. And I was crazy enough, I didn't care who I was friends with, I just wanted friends. So I kind of got in with the wrong crowd when I went to high school. I did things that I probably shouldn't have done, and it was really rough on me. I went and dated a guy who was physically abusive to me, who was sexually abusive to me, who was verbally abusive to me, emotionally abusive. And he just screwed me up completely. I had friends that treated me horribly. I got abused by my friends. And so I actually, in high school and even before high school, became suicidal. I didn't want to live anymore. And I did everything in the book I could to kill myself. And I'm not going to give any tips for anyone in here who's in the mood for it, but I wanted my life to end. Moving around, having to make friends, not being able to be very good and smart in school, and having a hard time with that, and the abuse from just growing up with everything, I wanted my life to be over. I was miserable. And I could not understand why after every single thing I did, I'm still alive. Why did God not let me be successful? I could not understand it. So I keep going on. I go on to college, and I wanted to be a nurse. All I ever wanted to do was be a nurse. My dad is a doctor, and I wanted to be like him. I wanted to make a difference in someone's life, any life. I love the blood and gore, and I wanted to be right there in the middle of it. So what I ended up doing, going to nursing school. It was a one-year nursing school. I would not recommend that to anyone, by the way, because you're cramming 4 years in one, and boy, I became a woman that year. I literally cried at the drop of the hat. My husband, at the time we were dating, he thought I was crazy because I would be laughing one second, crying the next second. It was just a mess. But I went through nursing school, and God actually, I've never made A's in my life, ever, but I made A's through nursing school. So I knew that's where God wanted me to be, was being a nurse. That's all I wanted. I got to nurse for about 5 to 6 years, and then my life changed. Around 2006, I got diagnosed with Graves' disease. That is a hyperthyroidism, if y'all are familiar with your thyroid. And with my Graves' disease, I was really sick. My thyroid was hot. I was having hot flashes like I was in menopause. I was eating like a pig. And I mean, one meal, I had 4 hamburgers, 2 hot dogs, and a plate of chips, and I was still hungry. That was one meal. But Graves' disease, you eat, and you're losing weight, and your metabolism is on fire. I lost a lot of weight. It was kind of fun. It's kind of sad I had to get my thyroid removed, but you kind of have to do what you got to do. And we had the procedure set up. We were going to get the thyroid removed. The day before the operation, I get a phone call from the surgeon. The surgeon says to me, "You're going to die on the operating table tomorrow if we operate on you." And he said, "The reason you're going to die is the second I put anesthesia in your body, you're going to go into thyroid storm." Thyroid storm is when you get a fever of like 105 or higher, your body starts convulsing, your heart rate is going so high that it just can't be controlled, and then your body, you die. He didn't want that, of course, to happen to me. So he said, "We have got to postpone this operation. We got to kill your thyroid, we need to cool it down, and then we can go from there." My level was 0.00. He had never seen that before. And he said, if we can get it to 0.01 or something, it's safe to operate. A month later, nothing happened. And he said, "We've got to get this out of your system." So he said, "We'll add some extra doctors in the operating room. That way, if you start to go into thyroid storm, we can hopefully get you out of it and do it safely." So a month goes by, I'm starting my operation. I'm a little nervous, but I know that God's in control. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's all in His hands. I go into the operating room. They give me the anesthesia. What happens? I start going into thyroid storm. Luckily, though, God was in control. He had enough doctors in there. He had everything He needed. They were able to get my body to cool down, and they were able to keep me from going completely into thyroid storm. Came out beautifully from the surgery, having no problems. Life was great for about 6 months. I could run, I could work, be the nurse I always wanted to be. I could do everything I wanted to do and was doing. And then life changed for me yet again. I ended up having heart palpitations. My heart rate was racing like crazy. I was hot flashing again, and I was like, I just got my thyroid removed. What is wrong with me? I shouldn't be having these weird symptoms again. So I go to a doctor, and he's like, "I don't know what's wrong with you. Let me take you to someone else." I went to someone else. They didn't know what was wrong with me. I went to someone else. They didn't know what was wrong with me. So I was actually getting quite used to hearing, "I don't know what's wrong with you. Nice to see you." Finally, we move here. My husband goes to grad school at Regent University after we got married, and we found a doctor here that actually is a heart physician, and he said, "I think I know what's wrong with you." And he said, "But I'm going to send you to a specialist. That way they can run tests on you and they can figure out what is wrong." So with all of that stuff going on, I had to have a waiting list to get into the specialist. So between now and then, I had a heart surgery. And that heart surgery, we were hoping would fix my problem. But it did not. He did see some things that he had not seen before in a heart patient, and I didn't. And the scariest part is I didn't get knocked out for this surgery. I was alive and living every bit of it. He was burning my heart, trying to stop the electrical currents from going off. My body was convulsing. It was a mess. But it didn't fix the problem. So finally, Mayo Clinic calls and says, "We have an appointment for you. We're ready to take you." So we go to Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is the only place that could do tests on me that they needed to do. I had 5 straight days of tests: heart tests, neurological testing, adrenal testing, straight 5 days, all day long of heart and every test you can think of. They finally told me a diagnosis I did not want to hear. They said, you have a very uncommon condition called POTS syndrome. Have you ever heard of POTS? Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And I don't have just one situation, I got two. I'm special. I also have inappropriate sinus tachycardia, which is a heart problem. That situation, this is the most confusing disease, it's unbelievable. But in school, as teachers, I'm sure you've learned fight or flight in school about when you have a predator coming after you, your adrenaline shoots up and you can basically do anything because you have so much adrenaline. My body stays in constant flight. My body reacts like a predator is coming after me 24/7. So my heart rate is constantly up and I just am I'm a mess on the inside. I also have attacks with this disease. They're very similar to a heart attack, and I get these symptoms that can last for 30 minutes, they can last for 6 hours, they can last for 10 hours, they can last however long my body wants to go on and do it. What happens is it comes on really quick, like putting on a light switch. When you do that, my heart rate goes up to the 200s. I'm heart palpitating through my whole body. I'm hot flashing. I have this thing in my throat right here that goes numb. I can't swallow. I can't talk. I can't see out of my vision. I get dizzy and my body turns to jello. And that all happens at one time and I become extremely nauseous. Those are the attacks that I get with this disease, and they did not know what, they just said there's nothing we can do for you with this condition. The thing with the inappropriate sinus tachycardia, I have all this extra adrenaline shooting from the adrenal glands up to the heart, and my heart is beating erratically out of control. At 1 minute, it's 98. The next it's 150. That's the inappropriate sinus tachycardia. So that's why I get the two in one. They say that if you have one, you have to have the other one. You can't just have one, you have to have them both. So I have a pair and it's just lovely. But I got the diagnosis at Mayo Clinic. They told me there, you cannot work, you can't have children, it's not safe to have kids. And I was devastated. I didn't want to hear that. I was young. I wanted to work. I went through nursing school for what? I can't be a nurse anymore? I was devastated. I came home from Mayo Clinic angry with God, bitter with God, and angry with every single person who could work, who could live, who could do everything that they could normally do, who could have children. I was an angry person. You did not want to know me because, funny story, my husband's grandmother called her house one night and she wanted to know about my curtains that I did. I have shears on my windows. And she was like, I want to decorate my house just like yours. Can you tell me how you did your curtains and can you come over here and do it? I started screaming at her. And I was like, no, I'm not giving you my curtains. And I was screaming like a mad woman. And it's just, I was angry and bitter. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be nice. And I just went off on everyone. You did not want to know me during those stages. But that's normal. When you have your life turned upside down, it's normal to go through a denial period and an anger period, and that was what I did. A few years went by during this stage, and I was at home, not nursing. I was just bored to tears. I'm a workaholic. All I ever wanted to do was work and just go on like normal people, and I couldn't do it. So I would just stare at the walls, truly, when I was there. My husband would come home from work and he would just find me bored just staring at the ceiling and staring at the walls, and he'd be like, what'd you do today? And I'm like, nothing. I don't know what to do. I didn't like TV. I didn't have anyone to hang out with because they're all working like normal people. So things had to change. One weekend we'd go home to Tennessee, which is where he's from and I'm kind of from there, for a football game. He's a Tennessee fan and I don't really care. I care about the mascots more than the football team. So I went back for the mascots, and my family has season tickets. So the good wife I am, I'm like, sure, what the heck, let's go back for a game. So while we were there, Don Piper, I don't know if any of you have heard of him, he wrote 90 Minutes in Heaven. His book is one of the only books I read. I'm strange. I don't really like reading. I think that goes with me not liking school. I just do not read well. I'm a slow reader, and it's just hard for me when I get through one sentence, I forget what the first sentence was, and I don't remember what I just read. So his book I actually read because you guess what? It's bloody and gory, and it talked about heaven. How cool. So that same weekend, we went back for the football game. Don Piper was speaking at my parents' church, and I had no idea. That Sunday morning, I was pumped up. I couldn't wait to be able to hear his testimony because I read about it. I couldn't wait to hear it. Satan did exactly what I knew he would do. I had an attack. I got nothing from his testimony. I was devastated. It was a horrible attack. And I'm in my own world, and I can't focus or hear anything. And it's amazing. But God used me that Sunday morning. I only heard 18 words out of the entire testimony. And God used those 18 words to miraculously change my life once again. Those 18 words were, if God can bring a dead man back to life, just imagine what he could do for you. And I sat there and said, you know what? I'm not dead. I still have a big mouth. I can use it. I still have legs and arms. I can do something. I'm not dead. Why am I acting like I am dead? I need to be doing something. And so at that moment, I sat there on that pew that Sunday morning and I prayed, God, I want you to remove all the anger from my life. Because I had built up anger as a kid from all the abuse that I had growing up. The loss of friends, the abuse from boyfriends, just the suicide attempts and not being successful, and why I'm still here, I don't know. I asked God to remove all of my anger. I wanted to have true peace and happiness. I had never in my life experienced that before. I didn't know what that was. And at that second when I prayed that, it was amazing. I also prayed, God, I want to finally accept this disease. I cannot keep being in denial about it. Yes, I have it. I can't pretend I don't, because I do. So I wanted to pray for acceptance. At that second, I prayed for acceptance, and I said, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Whatever it is that I need to do, whatever it is I need to be, just take out the anger, make me happy, and I'll do what you say. That second, I can't even describe it to you. God did something to me that is the most incredible thing I can ever share, but I don't even know how to share it because it's just a God thing. I felt my body, all the anger remove itself, and I felt nothing but peace. I started crying. I was having a God experience where I could not quit crying. I scared everyone around me thinking I was having a heart attack because I was bending over in the pew wailing like a baby. And Chris leaned down and said, are you having a heart attack? And I'm like, no, I'm just having a moment with God. I'm fine. But I just couldn't quit crying. And he gave me acceptance. I had actually felt, I was like, okay, I can handle this disease. I can live again. And then at that second, when he gave me acceptance and happiness, he gave me a vision. And the vision scared me because he said, I want you to write a cookbook. Now, I haven't told you about this before because it's just is that ridiculous that God would ask me to write a cookbook. Growing up, I didn't know how to cook. My mom was a great cook. She would teach me how to cook, but as a kid, you're not interested in that. You want to go do your kid things, and I tried to learn a little bit, but it just wasn't my thing. Growing up, my dad was at war. I was at home alone with my kitty cat, and I wanted a bagel. So I put my bagel in the microwave for 10 long minutes, and it caught on fire. The microwave was on fire, the bagel was on fire. It was a black mess. My parents' house was covered in black smoke. It stunk for months. So that was my first cooking disaster. I would make brownies with my sister. I don't do directions. So I would put so much water in there, we had soup. I burned Jell-O on the stove. Thanksgiving, I cooked turkey for my in-laws, and this is a really blind moment at the time because I put it in the oven as it said you're supposed to for the heat you're supposed to put it in. I thought I was going to do an amazing Thanksgiving dinner. I take it out when it said ding ding, you're done, and then I started carving it after I let it rest, and it was bleeding. I was like, are you kidding me? I can't even cook turkey. The blonde that I was at the time, not knowing how to cook, I decided, you know what, I've ruined this turkey. I live with woods behind my house. I put half the turkey that I'd carved on a dish and I threw it over the fence, thinking I have destroyed this bird, we can't eat it. It didn't dawn on me, oh, put it back in the oven and it will clear the blood up and it will be fine. So we had half a carcass for Thanksgiving that year because I didn't know that just cooking it longer would fix it. So that is why when God said, write a cookbook, I laughed at him and I said, are you kidding me? Do you not know who I am? I don't know anything about cooking. As a wedding gift, I had a spice rack given to me. I thought it was decoration, truly. I had never used one spice for 8 years. It just sat on my little counter as decoration. I didn't know what a spice was. I didn't know what an herb was. I just thought it was pretty and you put it in your kitchen and that was that. That's how pathetic it was. Chris and I would eat boxed meals every night. And I'm not kidding you. Every Monday we would have spaghetti, which is the one meal I know how to cook. That's a family secret. Then we'd have a boxed lasagna. Then we'd have a boxed chicken pot pie, hamburger helper. And every Friday night we had Mexican, because I really should have been born Mexican, because I love Mexican food more than anything. So we would go out on that night. But we literally ate boxed meals because I was scared, didn't know how to cook. When God said to do that, I was like, no way, you do not want me killing people. You don't want me poisoning anyone. I am not going to write a cookbook. But as you know, when God tells you to do something, it's going to be out of your comfort zone more than likely. And if you do it, He's going to make a way for it to happen. So I was like, all right, if you want me to write a cookbook, I'll do it. So after that, he told me, he said, I also want you to have a TV talk show one day. I don't like being on TV. I don't like being on camera. I don't like any of this stuff. I don't want to do any of that. And he's like, no, I want you to. I was like, okay. So we go home from Tennessee, we're back here to Virginia Beach, and I discovered the Food Network. That is where I went to culinary school. Food Network in my living room in my PJs. That is the best education I think anyone can have. I didn't have to go anywhere. And I learned so much. I also found out Cooking Channel. That was also my culinary degree. And the best part was I went in my kitchen and I did trial and error. I actually used those old spices and I realized they expired, so I need to get some new ones. So I got some new ones, and I cannot describe this to you. I went from not knowing how to read a cookbook, not knowing how to even write a recipe, to I have now written about 2,000 to 3,000 recipes. And it is so much fun. I will be in the dead of sleep, and God will give me a recipe, and He's like, and I have to get out of my bed, and I'm having to write it down because I'll forget it by morning. Or I'll be at the gym exercising, and a recipe will come to my mind, and I have to remember it while I'm in pump class or whatever class I'm in because it sounds so good. But the recipes just keep coming to me, and that is how the cookbook was formed. I cooked all these recipes and I was like, wow, I cannot believe God did something that was a miracle. For me to go from what I was before to cooking, people in my past who knew me back then, when I told them I published a cookbook, laughed. And they were like, you did not. I was like, yes, I did. They're, no, you did not. And I was like, yes, I did. And they're like, I'm not touching your cookbook. And I was like, but seriously, it's real good food. So God was amazing. So we went ahead and we went through, wrote the recipes, we cooked the recipes, and we found a publisher in the neatest way, a designer. My sister worked for an advisor in North Carolina. It has nothing to do with cookbooks and publishing, but he worked for an advisor who did finances, I believe. And she met a designer through that job. And the guy told her before she left her job, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. I'll be happy to do it, because they had a good working relationship. She said, there is actually something you can do for me. My sister is trying to write a cookbook, but she doesn't know anyone who can design it. She doesn't know anyone who can publish it. God told her to do it. Can you help her? He said, yes, I can. So I gave him my information. He designed my cookbook. And we were like, wow, this is actually happening. God is making something that I didn't think could happen. Now, cookbooks aren't cheap. They're not free. They don't grow on trees. And I was like, seriously? When he gave us the numbers for this cookbook, those thousands of dollars, I was like, we don't have that kind of money. I don't even have money to pay my doctor bills. How are we going to do this? But God said, if you trust me, I will deliver. We had money from people, gifts from people. We had to sell a car that was falling apart. We got that money from the car. And I don't know how it happened, but we had just enough money to raise for this cookbook. God's divine intervention just kept happening. We were at a party one night for my husband's birthday party, and something scared me to death that night. I have never had word of prophecy spoken to me ever. But while we were there that night, a girl who works at his job came. We were in the middle of a conversation about cats, dogs, I don't know what, and then out of the blue, she steps up and she just looks at me. And she has this weird look on her face, and she says, God just told me to tell you something. And I'm like, everyone's just like, what are you doing? You're kind of crazy. But she was like, no, God told me to tell you, whatever it is you're working on right now, it's going to be huge. It's going to be successful. You need to continue doing what you're doing, and it's going to be huge if you just trust Him. And I just kind of looked at her like, how do you know about this? And she said, are you working on something? I said, yes, I am. She goes, what are you working on? I haven't heard about it. I said, I'm writing a cookbook. God told me to write a cookbook. She said, that's what He told me just now, that whatever it is you're doing, it's going to be huge and successful, and to continue doing it and to trust Him. out. I was like, is this a psychic person? What's going on? Because I've never had word of prophecy spoken to me. I go home that night and I pray, because every night I pray literally, if this is what you want me to do, God, I want you to confirm this to me. I want you to show me that I'm doing exactly what you want. I want to be on the path that you told me to go on. I don't want to derail this in any way. Well, that night I did my Bible study from this book, Jesus Calling, and if anyone has never read this devotion book, you need to. It is incredible. God uses this it's an amazing book. But that night, after my devotion of Word of Prophecy and my prayers, I had this devotion that confirmed again my prayer. It was January the 5th, and it says, "You can achieve the victorious. You can achieve the victorious life through living in deep dependence on me. People usually associate victory with success, not falling or stumbling, not making mistakes. But those who are successful in their own strength tend to go their own way, forgetting about me. It is through problems and failure, weakness and neediness that you learn to rely on me. True dependence is not asking me to bless you with what you decide to do. It is coming to me with an open mind and an open heart, inviting me to plant my dreams and my desires within you. I may infuse with you a dream that seems so far beyond your reach, go figure my cooking. You know that in you yourself you cannot achieve such a goal. This begins your journey of profound reliance on me. It is a faith walk taken one step at a time, leaning on me as much as you need. This is not a path of continual success, but multiple failures. However, each failure is followed by a growth spurt, nourished by increased reliance on me. Enjoy this blessed and victorious life through the practice of dependence on me." I get chill bumps right now just telling you about it, that I prayed, God, I need confirmation, and that right there was confirmation, because I couldn't cook, and that was what He wanted me to do. That's beyond my reach. I have had many failures with this. I have had people tell me, friends and family, that you're stupid. You can't write a cookbook. What are you thinking doing this? And I've had many failures along the way of trying to get this cookbook done. But I did not give up. And that is what this whole thing is for you guys today, is never give up on life. I wanted to give up on life at a young age. I wanted to kill myself. I didn't want to live anymore. But if I had been successful in my suicide attempts, I wouldn't be standing here today talking with you ladies. I would not be able to do book signings and go to Curves and do cooking demos and sharing my testimony. I went to Africa and shared my testimony in front of thousands of people. I was told in Africa, your testimony's too deep. You can't talk about suicide and abuse. You need to shut up and you need to not talk about that, because these people don't need to hear that. After I shared my testimony, I was humiliated, and I felt that I should be ashamed for my life. And so I didn't want to talk to people anymore about my life. But I had women all over the African communities coming up to me in tears, crying, saying, I have tried to commit suicide my entire life, and because of your testimony, I see that there's hope. I'm no longer ashamed of my life. Yes, it's different from most people. Yes, I've had a rough ride growing up, but God gave that ride to me for a reason. I didn't want to go to speeches. I didn't want to be a motivational speaker. But God needed me to do that, because you never know whose life you can touch with whatever situation you're going through. And it's amazing. Growing up, you have no idea why you do what you do, why you go through what you go through. I had to take a speech class in my college. Before I went to nursing school, I actually wanted to be a psychologist, which is a great thing why I did not become one, because I don't have patience for that. I just do not. I'd be in jail for murder. So I actually stopped doing psychology to do nursing. But while I was there, I was forced to take speech. I didn't want to take speech class, because I sat there and said, I am never going to be a speaker. I will never need speech. I don't want to do it, but it was a requirement. And you see, God used that. He knew why I was forced to take speech. Look what I'm doing now. I've had other things happen. When I was at youth camp, again, I didn't like reading. I didn't care about doing my own devotions, but we were forced at youth camp to come up with our own devotions. And that scared me. I actually sat outside of each building and sat there in nature, and I sat there and said, God, you asked me to write a devotion, do a devotion. I don't even know where to begin. But it's amazing. The first day of my devotion, out of the blue, God gave me a scripture. And this scripture reads, it is actually James 1, 2 through 4. I don't know if you've read that before. But consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because it's the testing of your faith. It produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. No temptation has taken you, that's the next one. But that's James 1, 2 through 4. And I didn't understand why God gave me that scripture. I was like, testing of my faith, perseverance, okay, that's great. But I've noticed since I've gotten sick, through all the suicide attempts and everything that's happened, this scripture has been my rock. I needed that scripture to be able for me to see that, you know what, God gives bad things to us. He allows bad things to happen to test our faith. He wants to make sure that we are not going to sit there and rock the boat and take control in bad situations. He wants us to have complete dependence on Him and faith in Him, that no matter what happens, we're going to be faithful and we're not going to take control and we're going to give it to Him. I've had a lot of trials, and that scripture was my rock. Day 2 came. Okay, you have to do your own devotion yet again. So, my next one was 1 Corinthians 10:13. Not sure if you're familiar with that one. But no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not tempt you beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way that you can endure it. I was tempted to kill myself. I don't know how many times. I was tempted with all the abuse. I was a mess. But I learned God will not give you anything that you can't handle. He is going to give you just what you can handle. But He's going to give it to you where you're going to be rocking the boat a little bit, but He's doing that so you will rely on Him and you will seek Him during those times of need. Now I see why God gave me those devotions that morning and said, you need to do your own, because if I had done someone else's, I may not have had these scriptures to lean on throughout my life of growing up. So think about when you were growing up, things that you never thought about, why you did it, who you encountered, what happened growing up, because you never know how God can use your past for your future and how He's going to mold you into who you are today. But again, this whole testimony of mine is I just want everyone in here to know that if you are going through a divorce or a loss of a child or a loss of a job, or you're going through something that has just rocked your world that you just don't know how to see anymore and you just don't know what to do, and if you're contemplating suicide or if you know someone who is, don't give up on life. I gave up on life for a few years, and in some ways I regret it because I lost those few years of my life, but you know what? I needed it to be who I am today. It is normal to go through denial. It's normal to go through pain, but just never give up on life. I want you, if you're in those times, to pray and just say, God, I am willing to do whatever you want me to do. I seek your will first, and I want to do exactly what you want. I don't want to give up. And I promise you, He will direct your life in a way that you have never dreamed possible, and He will give you exactly what He wants you to do. Again, I went to nursing school for a year, and I was told after 6 years you can't be a nurse anymore, and I was devastated. So I was like, okay, that was wasted. But it wasn't wasted. I wrote a cookbook, and this cookbook is not just a normal cookbook. My cookbook actually has my recipe at the top of every page, and that has meat in it. It could be vegetarian, doesn't matter. It's whatever the recipe I wrote is. But on the bottom of every single recipe, I am not kidding you, I have alternatives for vegans, gluten-free, vegetarian, peanut allergy, dairy allergy. That is where my nursing degree was redirected. He knew what he was doing when he said, I want you to write your cookbook. You are a nurse. You know a lot of stuff most people don't. Put it in your cookbook. I'm redirecting your path. And I just thought that was the most clever thing that God could do. It has been so helpful. I've been able to make foods that are so bad for you healthy because of my nursing knowledge. I have baked mac and cheese, healthy. Have you heard mac and cheese be healthy? Or chicken parmesan? It's all in there and it's healthy. I mean, God is amazing how He can redirect your dreams and your path. So again, never give up on life, because God can make it something amazing if you allow Him. I'm going to close with one thing that I was doing. One night after 9/11, the 10-year anniversary this year, my husband and I were watching some 9/11 stuff. And I heard two pastors recite something that I thought was perfect for anyone going through a rough time. Bob Appleby is the first pastor, and he is a pastor in Connecticut. And he said that we live in a world today now where people look good on the outside, but they're in pain on the inside. Each and every one of us have our own ground zero to some degree. That is so true. My ground zero was my disease. My ground zero was not being able to work anymore as a nurse. Y'all's ground zero could be that a job loss, finances, anything. It could just be a bad day. You're not feeling good. That could be your ground zero. Carl Keyes then finishes up saying, but each individual person is in their own home, in their own school, maybe at their own job, and in their own life, they will face a ground zero. Sometimes those 9/11s of your own, that there is no one's hand to hold. But I will tell you that God always extends His hand to you your entire life. When the ground begins to shake underneath you, that is when it's time to find your own cross. It is time to find your ground zero. And when you do, you will realize that there is hope. You know why they said that? At 9/11, after all the buildings came crashing down, they thought God was gone. They didn't have hope. They thought that God had left us and abandoned us. But in the middle of all the rubble, after the buildings fell, they saw two beams that looked like a cross. And they put those beams out and they put them up for everyone to see that there is still a God. No matter how rough things get, God is still present, and there is hope. So I know that this is not ground zero, this is not 9/11, but just think about what's going on in your life right now. Don't give up on life, no matter how hard it is. And I just thank you for letting me come and speak with you guys this evening. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I've got cookbooks up here if you guys would like one. It's got a part of my testimony in there because God didn't want me selling a cookbook. He wanted me to get my testimony out to people, and this is the way He asked me to do that. So you have those there. And thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you. What it meant to be a Christian, because I was not in love with God. I did not understand the relationship we were supposed to have with God. I would pray, but I didn't pray the right way. I would go to church every Sunday because we were Christians in church every week, but I was a Christian, but I just didn't feel it. And so that Sunday morning, He miraculously did something to me, and I have been so in love with Him. I can't not tell my testimony. I tell it to everyone I come in contact with, and it pours out of me. And I think that is when I had my true experience of what being a Christian is really about. And that was just a few years ago. I think, 2008, I think. So God has been amazing and on fire in my life since 2008. And I can't not tell people about how amazing He is.
Is this your husband?
That is my husband, Chris, yes.
You're doing a good job.
Yeah, he comes with me to these for several reasons. One, I never know when I'm going to have an attack, and he can be there for me when things happen. If I end up having to leave, we never know. So he's there for that reason, and not to scare anybody. But two, I have a website that God inspired on me called inspiredartofcooking.com. I have testimonies on there. I have inspirational thoughts. I have a quote, and then I put inspirational thoughts about what's happened in my life on there to encourage others. And I have pictures from events, and I've got video footage, so if there's someone that stumbles across it in a foreign country, which they have, they can watch my speech and hear it. And it's been amazing having them hear my speech on my website, and then they tell me how God touched their life through that. So He likes to film these so we can get God's message out there even further. So yes, that's my husband, Chris, and he actually helped with the cookbook. I don't know how to type. I never took keyboarding in school, but God knows who we're supposed to marry and who our friends are supposed to be, and he typed up this entire cookbook, literally. We would actually, I am not kidding you, he would come home from work. He works at CBN. He would come home, we'd eat a very quick lunch, and the second lunch was over, we would go upstairs and I would read him the recipe. We would type up the recipe until dinner. We'd eat dinner, come back down, eat the dinner, go straight back up and write more recipe, type them up until about 11 o'clock at night. He would go to bed, get up and go to work the next morning, and we literally had that life, I am not kidding you, for about 6 months. But he knew that God asked me to do this. We're going to do it. Doesn't matter the time, how much you have to sacrifice. You sacrifice for God because He's going to bless you if you obey. So he did it. His name should be in there. It is in there, but it's an amazing thing.
I have one of your cookbooks at home, and I really haven't done any of the recipes, but I've looked through it. And I collect recipe books. It's almost like you don't collect recipe books now because they're on the computer. But
that's true.
Anyway, I like to have hands-on to look at it. But it seems to be a really good cookbook.
Well, thank you so much.
Testimony in there and all.
Well, thank you. I am amazed that, again, my cooking abilities before came into this. I'm amazed. In fact, there's a testimony that is truly amazing. My father-in-law is a minister, and he was in a hospital seeing patients. And he was telling one of his patients, or one of his ladies that go to his church, about my cookbook, and they were talking about it. This random woman comes around the corner, and she goes, "You know, be your own chef?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's my daughter-in-law." And she said, "I saw your daughter-in-law on TV," because I do cooking demos on the news stations in Tennessee when I go home. And so she said, "I saw her on TV. She made her homemade potato chips and her guacamole and salsa, and I had to buy her book." This woman was extremely overweight. She had diabetes. She had uncontrollable levels. She started cooking from the cookbook, and she lost over 25 pounds. Her doctor, at her doctor's appointment, was like, "What's wrong with you? What's going on? You've lost weight. Your levels are great. What did you do?" And she goes, "I bought this miracle cookbook that has transformed my life." And so it's just as amazing how, again, I couldn't cook, and now I'm transforming lives, and it's all because of God and His vision and Him giving me the ability. So this cookbook has been a blessing, truly, not just for me, but for other people. So any other questions?
Any other questions? How much is your cookbook?
They're $16.99. And like I said, they have recipes all through them, and you've got my recipe. And the funny thing is too, I can't stand to tell people how to do things. I'm this people pleaser. So my recipes, actually, the measurements are not exact, because I love flavor and I have really high cholesterol, so I can't add a lot of butter and salt to my food. So I have to cook with herbs and spices, that thing I didn't know about. But I have measurements in here. I want you to pick your measurement. If you want a little flavor, go on the smaller side. If you want a little more, just keep adding until you like it. And then you have tips in here. I have to live on a budget. I still can't pay doctor bills. We are still struggling financially. And so I have tips in here how to save money on your food, how to preserve it longer, how to buy food and use food and cook food for it to be easy for you to cook with, as well as to save money. And then, of course, you have the alternatives on the bottom of every recipe. There's no page flipping or anything. So it's kind of a neat book, and I know I'm biased because I wrote it, but it's never been written, and God just inspired the whole thing. But it's there if you guys want to take a look at it. And I've got some homemade potato chips. They are the best seller. I think y'all both had them when you came.
No, I'm gonna have another one.
There are some funny stories with that too. I won't bore you with them, but they're there if you would like to have some. And if my business card is up here, if you ever want to subscribe to the website, we can take your email and hook you up with it. And that way you'll get all my recipes that are added. Cooking demos from Curves or on TV, inspirational thoughts for encouragement. We'll be happy to have you get those in your email if you want to sign up with that. We can do that tonight too. So feel free to come on, take a look, and if you need me to sign it or have questions, feel free to ask.